Hi, folks. Let's talk about the absolute mental breakdown of the American left, because at this point, it's less a political movement and more a group therapy session with no copay. In a culture where feelings have replaced facts and victimhood is a form of status, any decision Trump makes is treated like a hate crime. Self-expression is morphed into self-destruction, and not liking the president now means smashing your own car like it personally voted red. These are the same people who spent 4 years lecturing us about defending democracy, only to unravel the second democracy doesn't go their way. And nowhere is that unraveling clearer than in our first clip today. A full-force tantrum caught on camera purposely for clout, for attention on the internet. So buckle up. It's going to be loud, irrational, and very on brand for Democrats.
America, please get me out of this place. I'm tired. I'm losing my shit. Tired. I'm fucking tired! 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 I'm fucking tired!
You know, if you really want to leave this bad, I'm sure someone could arrange it. Maybe not ICE, unless you've committed an actual crime, but certainly a travel agent or one of those NGOs that relocates people to more just countries like, say, Venezuela or Gaza or Iran. I'm sure Iran would love you out there. But of course, the screaming isn't about leaving. It's about demanding attention, affirmation, and power through emotional collapse. It's all performative. What we're watching is far beyond a tantrum. It's actually the logical endpoint of a culture that has trained an entire generation to treat feelings as truth and performative breakdowns as political discourse. This woman isn't oppressed, by the way. She's disoriented because the institutions that gave her a sense of purpose, whether it was media-driven, resistance porn, social media clout, or the fantasy of President Kamala Harris, have all collapsed. What remains is a hollow identity built on rage and fragility, screaming into a steering wheel while the rest of the world just moves on with their lives, working their jobs. And that's the real story here. The left's grip on culture is breaking not with a bang, but with a sob. And speaking of performative outrage, I think most of the world has heard at this point about America's strategic strikes at Iran's nuclear facilities. Well, it's no surprise to anyone that as soon as those strikes were announced, the clock started ticking for when the left would trade in their Mexico, Palestine, and pride flags for an Iran flag.
Did any of you sign up for another endless war in the Middle East? Did our intervention in Iraq free the people of Iraq? Did it free the people of Afghanistan? No! Benjamin Netanyahu got his wish. He's pulled the United States into Israel's reckless and illegal unprovoked against Iran.
Not a war.
President Trump took this fateful decision without congressional approval, even though it will trigger serious reprisals from Iran.
He didn't need
and put
it.
American soldiers directly in the line of fire. It was done not in response to any imminent threat, but because Trump and other leaders still have not figured out how to tell Benjamin Netanyahu no. Shame.
If you were to assemble a completely misinformed, emotionally charged, historically illiterate take on U.S. foreign policy, this mob in Times Square would be your casting call. Let's start with the basics. America is not at war with Iran. No shots were fired by Iranians, no troops were deployed, and no formal declaration of war exists from both sides. What actually happened was a precision strike conducted by elite U.S. forces targeting Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The same infrastructure that the regime repeatedly lied about while developing ballistic missiles capable of reaching Europe and beyond. The same Iran, by the way, that has often chanted death to America and burned the American flag in its parliament. But none of that matters to the progressive activist crowd because they're not responding to facts. They're reacting to narrative. A narrative that sees every defensive measure as imperialism, every ally as a liability, and every terrorist regime as a misunderstood victim. The protesters parroting Hamas talking points in the middle of Manhattan aren't opposing war. They're not virtuous. They're opposing America's right to exist on the world stage as a sovereign power. And the fact that they're this loud, this wrong, and this comfortable doing it in public shows just how much the left's long march through the institutions, media, universities, NGOs, has rotted our collective understanding of national interest history and basic moral clarity. And since we're on the topic of Democrat moral clarity, AOC just gave us another perfect case study, personally escorting Mahmoud Khalil, that proud anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, Colombia protester, back to New York City like he's a freedom fighter instead of a professional agitator. This isn't just bad optics. It's a reflection of how deeply the left's moral compass has been hijacked by identity politics and grievance theater. Khalil has openly supported groups that glorify resistance through violence, yet here he is being embraced by the supposed future of the Democrat Party. This moment is less about one congresswoman and more about what her rise represents, a political movement that now defines justice by who's most offended, not by who's objectively correct. The left once claimed to stand for peace, human rights, and democracy. Now it's led by influencers in government who can't distinguish between human shields and human rights. This is what happens when higher education becomes activism training, journalism becomes selective outrage, and leadership becomes cosplay rebellion. Anyway, needless to say that shortly after leaving AOC's side, Mahmoud Khalil went straight to the streets. And this is what he had to say.
You can hide! Colombia, you can hide! You're supporting genocide! You're supporting genocide! You're supporting genocide! You're supporting genocide!
Gotta hand it to Mahmoud Khalil. It's a little catchy if you hate America and every institution that's given you the freedom to chant your rage into a megaphone without consequence. Mahmoud Khalil, freshly released from ICE detention thanks to a federal judge, wasted no time marching right back to Colombia to lead chants accusing the university and by extension the country that educated him, protected his rights, and granted him legal residency of genocide. This isn't protest in the American sense. It's ideological ingratitude dressed up as moral superiority. Khalil isn't an outlier, by the way. He's a symptom of a deeper rot in elite institutions that have spent decades teaching young people that America is the oppressor, Israel is evil, and resistance means theatrical self-righteousness with no grasp of geopolitical reality. That's how we got here. An entire class of activists and academics trained to view Western democracies as villains while giving totalitarian regimes a free pass. And now they're leading marches from the very campuses that once stood for truth and inquiry. What we're witnessing is the left's long project of institutional capture reaching its militant phase, where the people who benefit most from this country are the loudest voices trying to tear it all down.
Who is Mahmoud Khalil? That's what the administration has tried its best to portray me as someone who's violent. Mahmoud Khalil is a human rights defender. Mahmoud Khalil is a freedom fighter. Mahmoud Khalil is a refugee. Mahmoud Khalil is a father and husband. And above all, Mahmoud Khalil is Palestinian. What's happening behind ICE detention gates is horrendous. It's a stain on the US Constitution. It's a stain on the US consciousness, because I fear that in a couple of decades we would look back at what's happening now and regret that. But it's actually taking toll on real people's life.
So he's a refugee and now he's trying to turn this country into the same authoritarian anti-Western nightmare he fled from? Makes total sense once you lobotomize yourself with activist slogans and start calling jihad justice. Mahmoud Khalil isn't a freedom fighter, by the way. He's a foot soldier for the ideological death cult that dreams of wiping Israel and America off the map, tearing down the foundations of Western civilization right behind it. He marched with Colombia United Apartheid Divest, a group that openly called for the total eradication of Western civilization. That's not free speech. That's sedition wrapped in campus credentials. And yet, here he is, on a green card, parading around American institutions he openly once destroyed while claiming victimhood status every time someone points out the obvious. This is what happens when the left's obsession with decolonization turns into a suicide pact with our own enemies, where identity erases ideology and radicals get to hide behind words like refugee and activist while laying ideological IEDs under the very freedoms they exploit. He doesn't need a microphone. He needs a one-way ticket out. And he's not the only one. We've got Jasmine Crockett, who definitely needs a one-way ticket out of Congress.
So I know they may claim we law and order, blah, blah, blah. So go get the undocumented people and let's try to ship them out. Let me tell you something. They are not the people that are putting us in harm's way. It is him and his administration that is putting us in harm's way.
How?
I am telling you right now that I legitimately have had no intel whatsoever. Zero intel.
Why?
As a sitting member of Congress, regardless of how you feel about me, regardless of my party affiliation. No one has consulted specifically with me or anybody in my office to give us any information.
Ah, yes, folks, the Jasmine Crockett clause of the U.S. Constitution, where apparently every military operation must pass through the linguistic approval of someone who can't finish a sentence without circling back on it. The Congresswoman is upset she wasn't briefed on the Iran strike. Great news for the rest of us. That's exactly why there were no leaks, no political theater, no last-minute grandstanding on MSDNC. But let's focus on her real claim that Trump and his administration are somehow more dangerous than the millions of unvetted illegal immigrants who flooded across our southern border during Biden's regime. That's not just delusional. It's a direct result of a worldview that sees American sovereignty as a problem and national security as an inconvenience. Crockett's rant isn't even about truth, it's about tribal loyalty. She's not representing citizens, she's representing an ideology that believes borders are racist, enforcement is fascist, and that protecting Americans is somehow more immoral than shielding foreign nationals who broke the law. This is the twisted moral inversion driving today's left. Criminals are victims, and the government's job is to protect everyone except the people who actually built and belong to this country.
I go back in on Monday. You could have hollered at us on Monday. If you truly felt like there was something, like there is nothing that they will say that will make me believe that this action needed to take place, and it needed to take place without the consultation of the Congress. All right, give me one more.
How can the Senate be involved and make them accountable for what they're doing?
I mean, listen, y'all are talking about accountability. The systems have broken down. The systems have broken down because people have legitimately decided that they would rather serve him than serve the people that put them into office. Like, I don't really have any, like, good answers for you. Except
you don't have any answers.
Legitimately, everything that he does is, like, against the law.
No,
like,
it's not.
He just breaks the law.
Do you even know the law?
And I know that there are some people that think that I just say this stuff because I'm a Democrat. And
yeah, you do.
I have my own issues with my own party.
Do you? Name one.
I'm not saying these things because I'm a Democrat. I'm saying these things because I am a black woman in America who just happens to be educated enough to know what the law is. And I can tell you that while some people want to disparage my credibility and act as if I don't know what I'm talking about, I can absolutely guarantee to you that if you Google war and authority and constitution, you're going to see Congress. And this thing that's like on my chest tells you that I am a member of Congress.
Can we please put a moratorium on politicians using face cam to make content? It's a transparently desperate attempt to look relatable, like they're one of the people, but it doesn't work for Gavin Newsom, it doesn't work for AOC, and it absolutely doesn't work for Jasmine Crockett, because having to watch a low-angle shot of a sitting member of Congress's dirty nostrils while she stumbles through half-formed thoughts about nuclear strikes and systems breaking down is not a brave political statement. It's a window into the intellectual decay of the modern left. Crockett's outrage over not being consulted before a precision strike on Iran's nuclear sites tells you everything about Democrats. They're more concerned with performative approval rituals than decisive action. Her claim that everything Trump does is illegal isn't actual legal analysis. It's a slogan repeated often enough to replace actual understanding of the law. And when she defaults to, I'm a black woman in Congress, you know, retreating back to her identity as a final word in her argument, it confirms that identity politics has become the substitute for policy literacy. This moment isn't just about one incoherent rant. It's about a generation of leaders trained more in grievance than governance, propped up by institutions that reward slogans over substance and victimhood over vision. So the question now isn't just how we got here, it's how much longer we're willing to pretend this is all normal. How much longer will we tolerate a political class that confuses emotion for intellect, identity for authority, and chaos for courage? At what point do we stop accepting incompetence as authenticity just because it wears the right labels? We're watching the erosion of reason, the hijacking of public trust, and the deliberate reshaping of reality by people who profit from the confusion. If this is the future, the institutions are offering performative outrage, weaponized ignorance, and loyalty to narrative over nation, then maybe it's time to stop looking for approval and start demanding accountability from Democrats. So, what are you willing to question? You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.